I spent my life giving, my time, my money, my strength, until there was almost nothing left of me. Then, one quiet morning, a slip of paper changed my fate. $17 million, my name scrawled on the back. But instead of joy, it awakened something darker. My own son and his wife saw it not as my salvation, but as their chance to cast me out. I bought the ticket at the Walgreens on Colfax, next to the laundromat with the broken soda machine. It wasn't something I planned. I just wanted a bottle of ibuprofen and a travel-sized hand lotion. And there it was, bright and blue, taped to the register. Mega Millions. Jackpot estimated at $17 million. The clerk was young, couldn't have been more than 20, with gamar chipped lavender nails and a look that said she'd seen too many grandmothers counting pennies. When I asked for one ticket, just the quick pick, she smirked like I'd wasted my money. Maybe I had, but 17 million felt like something you whispered into a well, just to hear it echo. The house was quiet when I got home. David and Laura were upstairs, probably watching one of those shows where couples flip houses and pretend it's stressful. I tiptoed into the kitchen and put the ticket between the pages of my Reader's Digest, the one with the article about widowhood and cholesterol. I didn't think about it again for 2 days. The morning I checked it, I was in my bathrobe, coffee still hot, slippers slightly damp from where I'd stepped in dog water. I sat at the table with my little Chromebook, pulled up the lottery website, and started comparing numbers. I kept blinking, back and forth. First the screen, then the ticket, then again, then again. I didn't scream. I didn't drop the mug or knock over the chair. I just stared. 1 match, 2, 3, all 6. All 6 numbers, my numbers, on my ticket. My name scribbled faintly on the back in pen. Helen E. Shaky, but mine. My fingers started to tingle. I thought it might be a stroke. I didn't tell anyone. Not that morning, not that afternoon. David asked if I could pick up almond milk at Costco. Laura reminded me to vacuum the stairs, the bottom half this time too, not just the easy reach. I nodded, I smiled, I did everything they asked. That evening, while we were having dinner, dry chicken, steamed broccoli, quinoa nobody touched. David was scrolling through his phone and suddenly said, "Oh my God." Laura looked up from her glass. "What?" He turned the screen toward us. Somebody from Arapahoe County hit the Mega Millions. 17 million. Can you imagine? She let out a dramatic gasp. Wait, wasn't your mom buying those dumb tickets last week? I kept chewing. Quinoa, still dry, still flavorless. David chuckled. Seriously, Mom? You didn't, did you? I smiled like I was confused. What? You didn't win the lottery, right? He said, laughing, nudging Laura. We'd be sipping cocktails right now. Laura leaned back in her chair, swirling her wine. Well, if she did, I hope she remembers who cooks her dinner. They both laughed. I looked down at my plate. Of course, I said. If I ever win the lottery, I'll buy you a restaurant. They didn't hear the irony. Later that night, they went into their bedroom early. I heard the door close, heard music, something upbeat, party-like. Then I heard the clink of glasses, toasts. They were celebrating. The next morning, Laura handed me a grocery list written in pink ink with little hearts on the eyes. Could you grab these, Helen? David's thinking we might need to do a bigger stock-up soon. I nodded and put on my coat. By the end of the week, their behavior shifted, slightly. David started talking about investments at dinner, pulling up real estate listings just for fun. Laura dropped the word Tahiti like it was a casual Tuesday topic. Then, one afternoon, I caught her in my room. She jumped, pretending to look for something she'd accidentally left during laundry. But I saw my Reader's Digest open, the ticket sticking out like a flag. She didn't look at me. That evening there was champagne, not real stuff, not the expensive kind, but enough to mark a moment. They didn't say it directly, but they knew, or thought they did. The problem was, they never checked the back of the ticket, never bothered to read the name in that shaky pen. They assumed. That's the thing about people like David and Laura. They assume generosity means surrender. That silence means agreement. That old means weak. They toasted to their future. And I sat across the room, watching them laugh under fairy lights they'd hung last Christmas and never taken down. I drank tea, quietly, from a chipped mug I bought in '98. And inside my pocket, I traced the edge of the ticket with my thumb, not for luck, but to remember. The first thing Laura bought was a new rug. Not just any rug, a cream and charcoal geometric monstrosity that looked like it belonged in a West Elm catalog and had no business living under our wobbly dining table. She unrolled it like she was unveiling a prize, then called David in to admire it. "It just elevates the whole space," she said, stepping back, arms crossed. I stood in the kitchen, watching them from behind my mug of tea. The old rug, the one Paul and I bought at a flea market in Taos back in the '80s, had already been dragged to the garage like a dead body. They didn't say it out loud, but the shift was immediate. A new espresso machine showed up next, followed by a subscription to some fancy coffee service. Beans flown in from Peru or some other place none of us had ever been. David started referring to our house as the property. Laura called the living room the entertaining space. One morning, she walked into my room without knocking and smiled too wide. "Hey, Helen," we were thinking, "maybe you'd be more comfortable downstairs. The sun doesn't hit this side much in the afternoons." More comfortable, that's what they called the dusty old study by the back door. It had no closet and smelled like mildew whenever it rained. I stood there, holding my laundry basket, listening to her talk about rearranging things, about optimizing the upstairs. I said nothing. That was my strategy now. Let them talk, let them assume. David ordered moving boxes. Laura started referring to my current bedroom as the nursery to be. She didn't ask, they never did. Within 2 days, my dresser was in the garage, and my clothes were stacked on a folding table in the corner of the study. My bed was a cot with a mattress topper. Laura even tried to cheer me up with a scented candle, something called Tranquil Orchid. It made my throat itch. The next blow came in the form of legalese. David brought home some paperwork and dropped it on the kitchen table like it was a bag of groceries. "Just some light estate planning," he said, nudging it toward me. "Nothing urgent, just future-proofing. It's good for everyone I didn't open it." I just stared at the man I gave birth to, whose diaper I changed in the middle of winter with cracked fingers and no heat in the bathroom. The man who once cried because I left him at kindergarten for 5 extra minutes. Now he stood in front of me, sliding a stack of trust documents across the table like a used car salesman. Laura chimed in from the hallway. It just makes things easier, Helen. We're not trying to take anything. We're family. Family. I nodded slowly. Of course, I said. I'll take a look. That night, I did more than look. I read every clause, every line. The trust would put the family assets, including any current or future winnings, under joint control. David would be primary trustee. I'd retain advisory status. Laura was listed as successor trustee in the event of incapacity. They were planning for me to disappear, not die, just fade, quietly, legally. The next morning I made eggs, not because anyone asked, just because I wanted something warm. Laura came into the kitchen in her yoga pants and protein shake in hand. Hey, Helen, she said, scrolling through her phone. Do you want to go over that paperwork later today? David has time this afternoon. I poured myself coffee. I'm not signing it. She blinked, caught off guard. Oh, well, maybe we can talk through. I'm not signing it, I repeated evenly. And I'd like you both to stop referring to my ticket as a family asset. Laura laughed, a little too loudly. Oh, come on, Helen. We're not stupid. You didn't even know you'd won until David mentioned it. That ticket was in your magazine, which was on the shared kitchen table. Technically, I turned to her. You didn't read the name on the back. I did. She opened her mouth, then closed it. I watched her recalibrate in real time. She wasn't used to pushback, not from me. That evening, they skipped dinner with me. No one said why. The next morning, I came back from a walk and found them whispering in the front hallway. When they saw me, they straightened up. David smiled too quickly. Hey, Mom, Laura and I have been thinking about the long term, and we're hoping you'll see the bigger picture. I see it just fine, I said, and I did. I saw it clearer than ever. They wanted the money. They wanted control. And more than anything, they wanted me out of the way, slowly, subtly, but surely. The worst part wasn't that they didn't love me. It was that they didn't even pretend to. 2 days after the confrontation in the kitchen, I found Laura in my room again. This time she wasn't pretending. She had my old file box open on the cot, flipping through folders with her mouth slightly open, humming that same tuneless little song she always made when pretending to be productive. When she saw me in the doorway, she froze, hand still in the folder, caught like a raccoon in the pantry. Oh, she said, all teeth. I was just trying to help organize. You've got some old insurance stuff in here. Thought it might be good to scan. I stepped into the room, calm. That box was under my bed, she shrugged. It's all family, right? Number. Not anymore. That night, I pulled out the real file, the one that mattered. I kept it in a bag of flour in the back of the pantry. It sounds absurd, I know. But after years with Laura, you learn she never cooks, and certainly not from scratch. The ticket was still there, crisp clean. My name on the back, just as I remembered. I packed it into my purse, along with my ID, Medicare card, and the number for a tax attorney I met at church 4 years ago, during a community potluck. I called him the next morning. Mrs. Ellis, he said after I introduced myself. 17 million? Are you sure? As sure as I am that the people I live with would sign me over to a memory care unit if it meant a new Tesla. He met me at a diner off a 25, the kind with cracked leather booths and coffee that smells like burnt hope. I handed over the ticket in a Ziploc bag. He examined it carefully, then looked up at me. "You know you're in for a fight, right?" "If they think this is theirs," I stirred my coffee. "They don't think. That's the problem." We submitted the claim through the official channel quietly. I asked for everything to be set up under a new LLC. Not that I needed one, but I didn't want the check mailed to the house. The attorney agreed. We set up a separate bank account under the business name, with me as sole owner and signatory, clean, legal, out of their reach. Back home, David had started acting off. Not openly hostile, but watchful. He hovered, asked if I'd had any confusion lately. Mentioned how I'd repeated myself once during a story. I knew where this was going. One afternoon, I found a note in the trash near the garage. A scribbled list with the title, "Signs of Early Cognitive Decline." Bullet points included, repeat stories, forgetful, possibly vulnerable to manipulation. The handwriting was David's. They were preparing something bigger. Then, without warning, it happened. I came home from my weekly crochet circle, the one Laura always mocked, and found the lock on the front door changed. My key didn't fit. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe maintenance. Then I saw the note taped to the door in Laura's handwriting. "Helen, we need space to think. Staying at a friend's for a few days might be best. Let's talk next week." It wasn't even a confrontation. It was administrative. I stood there on the porch, holding my tote bag with 3 half-finished dishcloths, a jar of peach preserves, and my favorite crochet hook. I didn't cry. I didn't knock. I pulled out my phone and called a cab. The driver was a young man, polite, didn't ask questions. I asked him to take me to the extended stay across town, the one with kitchenettes and month-to-month options. In the hotel room, I placed my purse on the bed and sat down in the kitchenette chair. I stared at the tiny white stove, the mini fridge, the packets of instant coffee. It wasn't home, but it wasn't a prison either. I opened my email and forwarded everything: lottery confirmation, bank statements, attorney info, to a new secure account I'd made that morning. Then I called the police. Not 911. I wasn't having an emergency. I was documenting a wainas. Frontful eviction. Officer Coleman came the next afternoon. Mid-40s, polite, a little skeptical, until I showed him the mortgage paperwork. House in David's name, yes, but I'd paid every utility for 3 years, contributed to groceries, cooked meals. I showed him photos of my old room, now stripped, the cot in the study, the note on the door. He nodded. "You have a case." The best part? I didn't even need to sue them to win. Not yet. Just needed it on record. Just needed them to know they weren't operating in the dark anymore. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Not because the bed was comfortable, it was a cheap mattress over plywood, but because for the first time, I was on a fence. Let them celebrate. Let them post about their future plans and browse listings for beachfront condos. Let them believe they won. They hadn't even checked the name on the ticket. But the lottery office had, and so had the bank. The call came on a Wednesday morning, just after I'd made myself oatmeal in the little microwave in my motel kitchenette. The number was unfamiliar, but local. When I answered, a calm woman's voice asked to confirm my identity. I did. This is Monica with the Colorado State Lottery Claims Department. I just wanted to verify that we received some unusual correspondence regarding your winnings. I set my spoon down. Go on. We received documents requesting the transfer of funds to a third party, a man named David Ellis. He submitted a signed authorization form along with a copy of a notarized letter, supposedly from you. My pulse didn't spike. My fingers didn't tremble. I just let the silence sit. I never signed such a letter, I said. That's what we suspected. The signature was off, and we couldn't verify the notary. We've flagged the attempt and will notify the authorities, unless you prefer to pursue this privately. I want it documented, I said, and I'll be forwarding evidence of other attempts he's made to gain access to my finances. She paused. I'm sorry this happened. I'm not, I said. I'd rather know exactly who I'm dealing with. That afternoon, I met with my attorney again. We gathered everything: the falsified form, the timeline, the recordings I'd started making. Around the house months earlier, when Laura began floating phrases like power of attorney and she's just not herself lately. We filed a report with the EU police, not just a civil complaint, but an official fraud investigation. David's attempt to take the winnings hadn't just been a betrayal, it was a crime. While we were at it, I had my attorney pull me off the shared utility accounts, cancel the auto payments I'd set up for their internet and gas, and secure every last detail of the trust tied to the new LLC. I was done funding their lives while they tried to erase mine. I also visited my doctor, the one I hadn't been able to see in over a year because Laura kept forgetting to schedule the rides. My back, stiff and pinched for months, finally got the steroid injection it needed. I got fitted for new orthopedic shoes, updated my prescriptions, renewed my Medicare plan. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was walking in my own body again, not just surviving inside theirs. But the part that brought me the most quiet joy came later, in a coffee shop downtown where I met Clarita, the woman who used to clean Laura and David's house once a week. They let her go just before the holidays last year. Said they were tightening the budget, even though I knew they'd just bought a new wine fridge. Clarita was kind, soft-spoken. She cried when I handed her the envelope. It's too much, she said, pushing it back across the table. No, I said, it's just enough. Use it to catch up on rent, or take your daughter to that dentist you mentioned. Whatever you need. She sniffled, wiped her eyes, and held my hand. Thank you. You don't need to thank me, I said. Just don't clean another room in that house again. Later that week, I did the same for another woman, Deborah from the rehab center, where Paul stayed for 2 months before he died. She'd been on my mind since I found her GoFundMe for physical therapy her insurance wouldn't cover. I donated anonymously, but she sent out a message to all contributors, and when I read her thank you note, I cried in the motel for the first time. Not for sadness, for something like release. Meanwhile, David and Laura were spinning out. They tried to contact me. Calls, texts, even emails from Laura's old AOL address. I ignored them all. My attorney advised me not to respond, and I didn't need encouragement. Silence is sometimes the sharpest answer. Then a friend from my old book club forwarded me a post from Laura's Instagram. A boomerang video of her and David clinking glasses over a laptop. The caption read, day one of our journey to financial literacy, learning how to manage generational wealth like pros. Blessed Napajami manifesting. The irony nearly killed me. There they were, trying to educate themselves on wealth they didn't have, grinning at a future they believed was already in escrow. And me? I was sitting in a room the size of a shed, with yellowed curtains and a folding chair for a nightstand. And I was more in control than I had been in decades. A few days later, my face was on the local news. They ran the story. Retired woman from Aurora wins $17 million in state lottery. I'd done the interview with soft lighting and a new scarf from Target, hair brushed back, and a look I hadn't worn in years. Calm certainty. The station didn't name David or Laura, of course, but I knew they were watching. I pictured them on their couch, the same one I bought them from Crate and Barrel when David got promoted, staring at the screen, mouths slightly open. I smiled into the lens when they asked me what I planned to do with the money. Help some people who need it, I said, and I meant it, just not them. They filed the lawsuit exactly 6 days after the news segment aired. I knew they would. The moment my name was announced on that soft-lit broadcast, David and Laura went from deluded opportunists to full-blown predators. The complaint arrived in a thick envelope slid under my motel room door, printed on heavy cream-colored paper that reeked of Laura's favorite citrus-scented hand lotion. Even their legal threats smelled artificial. They were suing me for undue influence, incapacity, and fraudulent retention of jointly acquired property. Jointly acquired property, as if my $2 lottery ticket, purchased with the change I had left after picking up my generic heart meds, was somehow a family heirloom. I sat on the edge of the bed and read it all twice. Then I called my attorney. "We'll counter," he said. "But let me guess, they're not just going after the money. They're going for character assassination. They're saying I'm senile." He didn't laugh. "Then we bring the recordings." We'd already prepared for this. I'd given him audio files, Laura whispering about planting the seed with the family lawyer, David suggesting that if I were declared incompetent, things would move faster. Their voices, their words, their plan. I filed a countersuit within 48 hours for unlawful eviction, attempted fraud, and emotional distress. It was aggressive, purposefully. I wanted them on defense for once. The court date was set for the following month. In the meantime, I moved out of the motel. I found a short-term rental with a sunroom and a dishwasher that didn't sound like it was dying. I bought myself a used Prius. Nothing fancy, just enough freedom. At night, I'd make tea and reread old letters from Paul. He used to scribble in the margins, little notes about the kids. David cried at the Lion King again. Or remind me to fix Laura's cabinet hinge before it snaps. Back when they were still worth fixing, the day of the hearing, I wore a dark blue blouse and the pearl earrings Paul gave me for our 25th. Laura came in stilettos and a blazer that still had the sales tag peeking out from under her hair. David wore the same suit I bought him for his first real job interview years ago. The lapels still puckered from dry cleaner starch. They didn't look at me. Their lawyer, some oily man with a smirk that could curdle milk, argued that the ticket had been abandoned in a communal area, that my mental state was questionable, and that David and Laura had merely stepped in to provide financial stewardship. My attorney stood slowly. adjusted his glasses, and played the first recording. David's voice filled the courtroom. "She's not gonna fight us." She probably forgot she even bought it. "Then, Laura, we get the money, we pay off the house, and maybe we upgrade her room. Keep her on our insurance so it doesn't look shady." When the audio ended, the room was dead quiet. Even the court reporter stopped typing for a second. The judge, an older woman with gray coils pinned tightly above her collar, looked over the rim of her glasses. "Let me make sure I understand," she said. "You threw your own mother out of her home, attempted to forge legal documents, and publicly claimed funds that were clearly not yours, all while planning to restrict her independence under the guise of stewardship." David opened his mouth, closed it. Laura started crying. I didn't flinch. The ruling came quickly. The court affirmed my legal ownership of the winnings. My countersuit would move forward to civil court if I wished, and I did. David and Laura would be investigated for attempted fraud. The forged documents were already in the hands of the district attorney. As we walked out of the building, Laura tried to follow me. "Helen, please, we made a mistake. We thought you'd share." I stopped, turned, and looked her straight in the eye. I did. For years, I shared my food, my home, my retirement, my patience. You drank all of it, and when you saw something you didn't think I'd fight for, you tried to steal it. She blinked. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. David didn't speak. He just stood behind her, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. That evening, I met Margaret at our usual cafe. She brought a small box of pastries and a newspaper, the local edition, front page featuring a picture of me outside the courthouse. I looked older than I expected, but I also looked like I belonged there. We sat quietly, sipping our coffee. "I told you," she said eventually. "You've always been sharper than they gave you credit for." I smiled. I don't think they ever really saw me at all. Back at home, I pulled out my old notebook, the one I'd used for shopping lists and birthday reminders. I opened to the last page and wrote a single sentence. "Don't forget who you are, even when they do." Then I closed it, placed it in the drawer by the bed, and poured myself a glass of wine. I didn't toast. I didn't need to. 3 months later, the ocean was my neighbor. I bought a modest single-story house in a sleepy Florida town, where the sidewalk still buckled with tree roots and old women in visors walked their dogs before the heat settled in. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't need to be. There were no marble countertops or grand entrances, just creaky porch boards and a breeze that carried the scent of salt and jasmine. My days began slowly. I'd make tea, real tea, not whatever sad decaf Laura used to buy, and sit on the back porch in a rocking chair I picked up at an estate sale. I learned the names of the birds, painted buntings, red-shouldered hawks. A woman down the street, Evelyn, brought over a pie on my second week. Peach bourbon. We didn't talk about families, just books, gardens, and the absurd cost of eggs these days. I heard through mutual acquaintances that David and Laura sold the house, the one I had kept warm and full and forgiving. They needed the money for legal fees and to pay off the furniture and appliances they bought on faith. Laura moved back in with her sister in Colorado Springs. David, well, last I heard, he was renting a studio above a garage in Littleton, telling people he'd been burned by bad investments. They never reached out again, no apology, no explanation. But one morning I got a letter. It wasn't from them. It was from Jacob, my grandson. 11 years old, neat handwriting, a drawing folded inside. Me with a big sun hat, standing on a beach, holding a fishing rod. The ocean behind me looked like it had been drawn with a blue crayon chewed at the end. He wrote that he missed my pancakes and asked if Florida had alligators. I wrote back, "Not right away. I waited a week." Then I bought a card, something simple with seashells, and told him yes, Florida had alligators, but also ice cream trucks that played Beethoven, and neighbors who fed stray cats, and a garden where I was trying to grow tomatoes despite the heat. I didn't mention his parents, but I told him he could visit someday if he wanted, and I meant it. Meanwhile, I'd started something new. I called it the Ellis Senior Grant. Just a quiet little fund, no press, no gala, that sent small anonymous checks to women over 60 who were in transition. I worked with local case managers and community centers. I read every application myself. I didn't give to everyone, but I gave enough. One of them, a woman in Tampa, escaping a controlling daughter and a locked bedroom, sent me a thank you card that said, "I didn't know people like you existed." I pinned it to the fridge. Occasionally, someone at the market would recognize me. "Aren't you the lottery lady?" they'd ask, curious but cautious. I'd nod, but I'd always correct them. "No," I'd say, "I'm the woman they tried to erase." At night, the porch lights flickered warm. I read by lamplight. I didn't need much. My needs had grown smaller, sharper, like stones polished by water. I didn't crave luxury or revenge, just space, just truth, just the quiet certainty that I'd chosen myself. Finally, after all those years of shrinking and giving and being called ungrateful, the one time I asked to rest. Freedom didn't look like a jet or a mansion. It looked like not flinching when the phone rang. It looked like tea on my terms. It looked like waking up in a house where no one would ever again call my name like it was a chore. I wasn't just free, I was seen, even if only by myself, and for the first time in decades, that was enough.